Right, putting the door on this thing. Start here. Apply a little spot of synthetic grease onto the pins of the door. And that's to keep them in place while we're assembling things. Otherwise, one at least is going to fall off. That'll be a nuisance. Okay, so they're just glued in place with grease. Right, to get the door on. Start at the bottom. Get that pin in place. Lift the top up and into position. You can see we've got that pin in that slot, that pin in that slot. The paper washer here has fallen out, I'll have to have another go. This time. Right, so next the hinge pin screws and the washers for them. Now there were two washers in both positions, top and bottom previously. So I'll slide out the door . Get a pair of washers sitting on there. Get the door in. Nope, it's fallen off. Right, I've got the hole lined up and I'll get one of the hinge pin screws in place. Now the hinge pin screws are interesting in that they're easily confused with the screw that holds the sprocket to the sprocket shaft, except the screw that holds the sprocket to the sprocket shaft is longer and the head of it might just be slightly smaller than the hinge pin screws. So line up all three screws together. That screw is not picking up. It's a problem when you're going through two washers at the same time, as often they'll shift relative to each other and the screw won't go through. Just checking that I'm passing through the washers. I am. It's just not picking up on the door. Now it's working. I just had to lift the door slightly so that the fairly short screw was finding the thread. At the bottom, it's the same deal. We have two washers. Now your camera may well have two washers. It may have the more common arrangement is two washers, a thicker one at the bottom and a thinner one at the top. Since I've got doubled up thin ones, it makes this a little bit awkward. But I can see the hole there that the screw's got to pass through. See if I can push these washers into place. Yeah, looks like it. And there's the hole in the door that the pin needs to go in. Alright, so the door's back on, the hinge pins are in place, they're tightened up. We can apply a bit of synthetic grease to those struts now. Some here and some in the long slots here. You don't need much, and most of it will disappear very promptly just in the action of moving the door up. So making sure your focus is set to infinity, press the release buttons, check that the door opens and closes. It may not pop much when you press the button. This one pops quite a bit. If you've got too much tension here, then there'll be too much friction. That'll be inclined to make it less likely to pop easily. You get one like that, press the button, tap the camera on your hand like that, and the door will start to open. So our focus is all working nice and smoothly. The transfer shaft through the camera is present and moving smoothly. The door opens and closes smoothly. That part's done. Film advance next. I found a replacement for this cracked and solvent damaged take-up spool, so I don't need to try and glue that back together. This one here, it's not the shiniest one I've ever seen, but it's correct for the model and it's complete. So we can put this into the camera. Here's the bush that goes into the base, the take-up spool, and the take-up spool goes into the camera right here. The advanced shaft needs to be lubricated. I use synthetic grease to do that job typically. Run some into the spring, pull this back, get some on the shaft there so it gets between the shaft and the bush, and check that the action is smooth, nothing is rubbing or catching. That was all that's required. Now this plate, it's got a slot in it. Now by convention, the slot goes towards the end of the body. Check that the take-up spool goes over the shaft smoothly. It'll probably catch on the spring. Yeah, it was there. And you may have to tuck the spring back into its socket. There are 3 screws hold this in place. And once you have all 3 screws in place, tighten them up. You don't need to go crazy tightening them up, but they do need to be snug. Unfortunately, that's something that you can only learn from experience. I can't tell you how to measure that. Alright, so now we want our release lever for the spool there. I'll just tuck this leatherette back out of the way. I'll just put something through there to hold it. This is the lever, and this releases the rewind button. And take a bit of synthetic grease here. Make sure there's some around the tip, and a quick wipe through the centre is all that's required. There's a return spring. The return spring sits in the body like that. The retaining screw is a stepped screw so that the spring can move freely around the screw and the lever can move freely around the screw. Just check that the lever and spring are not trapped underneath there, and tighten that screw up. The spring, I need to lift the end of the spring over and get it behind this lever. Like that. So this lever is now spring loaded. Next, we can put the sprocket shaft in the camera next. Sprocket goes in slot upwards. Here is the shaft. I'll just give that a quick wipe with some synthetic grease near the top and near the bottom where it runs through the body. It doesn't need to be lubricated for the sprocket to revolve on it, because the sprocket does not revolve on it. Alright, so that's fed through from the top, and you can see, let's get this back out of the way, you can see that this bracket, this lever is catching that. We pull this back, it allows us to press this up into position. There are 2 holes in the shaft. Let's get this revolved into position so I can see the screw hole. There. There are 2 holes, and this is the screw that goes in there. It's like the screw that held the hinge pins in place, except it's longer, and it may be slightly smaller in diameter, the head of it. If the screw runs in smoothly, like that one did, all well and good. If it doesn't, try revolving the shaft 180 degrees and going from the other side. Often that's all that's required. There may be a chamfer on one side and not the other. Right, so the rewind button can go on at the base of the camera. and we have our rewind button, the spring and the washer. And normally I put some synthetic grease on the spring, pop that over the button, put our washer in place, or you can pop it over the button if you like, fit the button and run it up. Hold the shaft in place with your finger from the top. You'll probably find that this thing has allowed it to, the catch has dropped over the top and blocked it. That's looking good. And if I find my special pliers, I'll just nip this thing up now. Holding the sprocket with your fingers, tighten the button up, and you know when it's tight enough because your fingers will hurt. Easy. Right, so now we have our sprocket in place. You can see it's fixed to the rewind button at the base there. We can just about close up the bottom of this camera. Pull that leather back for the moment. Get these covers in place. So, we have our tripod socket. Held in place with 3 screws. You'll probably be able to find these. They will have traces of adhesive and leather on them probably. These have been through the cleaning process, but you can still see traces of adhesive on them. With all 3 in place, now I'll nip those up tight. Now we want the cover for the button in here. That's held in place with 2 brass screws. The heads on these screws are quite shallow. They fit into recesses in that plate so that the plate is effectively flat. These brass screws are where you get your Zeiss bumps form on the base of the camera because of the dissimilar metals promoting the corrosion. Right, they're both in place. I'll nip those screws up. And think about closing this up at the bottom now with the leather. Now the leather here, as you can see, there's a great lump of green crud there. That's a technical term. You want that off. It's also stretched the leather at that point, but trying to unstretch leather is a bit awkward. So get rid of that green crud. Clean that surface with some naphtha on a cotton bud. I'm concentrating on that area because that's where it had the green waxy rubbish on it. Now at the base of the camera here you can see I've got the leatherette peeled back fairly well. I'm just wiping these surfaces to remove any traces of oil or grease so that the adhesive will stick well. That's looking good. Let's tighten the front of this so the camera will stay where I put it. Alright, now some glue. Now if you'd like to avoid any troubles, take a bit of your synthetic grease on a cotton bud, just run it round the inside of that hole in the leather where it goes over the button. That will stop glue from sticking to the button and causing you immense amounts of grief when you don't get the button to work. So I'm just going to apply a big blob of adhesive onto a piece of paper. Take a toothpick and transfer that to my leather. I want to get it worked in quite well down here at the end. And I just want a good even coat on that leather. It shouldn't be puddles. I'm picking up bits of old glue here. I'm just removing that as I go. If it comes loose, it'll only come loose if you don't want it to. Leatherettes and leather, if it's going to peel, it peels from the edges. Leatherette peeling from the middle is not a thing. So make sure you've got good coverage with your adhesive right to the edges. I even remember repairing one camera where the previous repairer had only glued the edges. They had no glue at all on the rest of the leatherette, the centre if you like, the vast bulk of it. Alright, that's looking good. Now I'll just run this leather back down, making sure that it fits neatly around this boss. I usually use the edge of my tweezers to do that, and around this boss, because the leather will have shrunk. So the nature of leather, over time it dries out, it shrinks. Alright, so our leather is back on the base of the camera. Just rub this with my finger to remove any stray adhesive. Now you can see that that bump there where we had the Zeiss bump is probably not going to flatten out very well. I'll press it once or twice, it may learn to take the shape I'd like it to take. But you'll see that by peeling the leather all the way back to the end here, you can't see any problem. If I'd only peeled it back this far to get it to screw, we would have a definite line across the leather. It would be obvious that someone had been in there, and it would be obvious that they hadn't peeled the leather all the way back. So it's always worth peeling the leather back to a useful point, and the useful point in this case is here, because that boss is riveted over the leather. You can't get the leather off over that boss except by terrible rough means like cutting around it with a scalpel. It won't leave a tidy finish. So leave it on, just peel it back as far as you can get. Okay, so the leather's back on the base of the camera. We have the shafts in place, and the next thing to do is to start reassembling the top of the film advance mechanism. Alright, put this film advance together. I need to start with the clutch assembly. The clutch assembly consists of three pieces: the outer drum, the inner piece which connects with the take-up spool, and the spring that connects the two pieces together and provides us with our controlled slippage. Now I have some nice thick grease here. This is supposedly contains molybdenum, but I like this lot because it's nice and tacky. It stays where it's put. Once there's a layer on there, it remains a layer. But you could use synthetic grease there. You can use just about anything. Now assembling this thing. Take our centre, put the spring in place. There's a tiny little tab on that spring, must drop into that slot. Now I use these pliers and I'll lower that onto the top to hold that tab in place. That spring's just shifted on me. Now holding that together like that, I rotate this with my fingers, pulling that spring in as it rotates. So the spring is now pulled into a small diameter. This piece just slides over the top. Slide the pliers out from underneath. These are just some crimp lug pliers. Got nice rounded hollows in there. They're made for doing insulated lugs. Works wonderfully for this. Now the clutch. The clutch has controlled slippage. It slips much easier in one direction than it does in the other. And the direction that it moves much easier is the correct direction, which may be by design. I'm just going to put some synthetic grease through the centre of that. Drop it in place on the take-up the film advance shaft, and that should engage with the top of the take-up spool in here. Right, now for the other bits and pieces. This we need. This is the guide bush for the film advance. Now this has got two sets of pinions on it, which take action from the top to the bottom. I'm just checking these to make sure there are no broken teeth. They all look complete and intact, and that's good. Now to lubricate those, because these components have all been through the ultrasonic cleaner in solvent, and they're pretty much free from anything that looks like lubricant. I'm just putting a big blob of grease on there. I'll squeeze that with my thumb, and the hydraulic pressure will just push that grease through. I'll do the same on the other set. And I'm going to give this a wipe through the inside, through the centre. Those gears are all nicely lubricated, and put this in place on the top of the film advance shaft. You may need to rotate the take-up spool or the sprocket shaft to engage things so that this thing seats. And this is held in place with 3 flathead or countersunk head screws. Now I'm just going to check that those are engaged smoothly. That all looks good. Tighten the 3 screws up. And check again. Everything seems to move freely and smoothly. That's all good. And we can assemble the gears on the top here. So, starting with this piece, it goes flat side down. I'm just going to give that a light wipe with synthetic grease, some through the centre. Revolve that, and it will engage with the teeth on here and here. So these two will revolve together. If I move either of these things, you can see those things move together. Now there's a little ratchet pull that goes on here, so we put the spacer on. The ratchet pull. And then there's the spring, the screw that they run on. So I'm just going to put a touch of grease on the centre of that. See if we can get this seated. You've got to get it through the pull, through the spacer, and lined up with the hole on the top plate. I can't even see where I'm supposed to be. Hang on. That's better. Right, so you need the pull to revolve freely around that screw. And the screw must pass all the way down through that spacer underneath, so that the spacer is not holding the screw up in the air either. That's better. It's finally doing it. Now to get this sprung loaded correctly, bring this round here. We want the short leg of the spring behind this tab, like that. It sits in a notch at the back of the pawl. You can see that that pawl is now sprung loaded. I'll just check that that screw is snugged up tight. Check that the pawl still moves freely, and that pawl's job is to stop this from being able to back up. This wheel can only move in one direction, it can't back up. That's the way it's designed, and that's how it works. Right, let's get some more of this together. Normally I arrange this so that these slots are forward and aft. Take this piece, I give that a light wipe with some synthetic grease, a very light wipe, and this sits on here with the circular recess upwards, and this spring sits in that circular recess. It's a conical spring, so it's narrower at the top than it is at the bottom. This piece, I'm just going to give that a very light wipe. Probably get away with nothing there. This piece. Now normally when I put this on, this slot in the here, that couples up to this piece. Get this in the right orientation. I think I want to start this around about here. Because we want about a turn of tension on our rewind, on our film advance when we go to put it back together. So I'm just checking which way around I should have that. That way is where I want to start. That's probably about right there. See if I can get that tab engaged. That's probably a bit much. I think I want to come around a quarter of a turn. Anti-clockwise from there. Get my tab engaged. That's better. That's a good position. I'm quite happy with the state of that. That should give me a good response, so that when I swing the film advance lever it comes back to the rest position smoothly under its own steam, and isn't over tensioned. If you over tension it, you can actually damage the spring, or you can get to a situation where the spring coils bind over each other and the action's stiffer. Instead of moving freely, it's even stiffer than it was before. That's looking good. We've got a bracket that goes over the top of this, and we have to put something else in here first. Now I'm just taking some molybdenum paste, give it a wipe in here. There are two small springs. One of them is a slightly smaller diameter than the other, and the smaller diameter one goes in here. That's for the film release button. The larger diameter one doesn't. That drops down in here. Let's get this thing in place. First I've got to make sure I drop it down the right hole, which is this one. This is the lever that goes down there. I'll give that a very light wipe with molybdenum paste. And that drops in there on top of that spring, like that. Now we want the hold down bracket, which is this piece. This also has a little gear on it, which will couple to the cocking rack. Now this gear is likewise unlubricated at the moment, so I'm just going to apply a little bit of synthetic grease there, give it a squeeze with my thumb, and that'll carry the grease in underneath there and cause that to be lubricated. Now this bracket goes on. The bracket holds down this piece so it can't get away. There are 3 screw holes in the bracket. 2 plain screws go in the back positions here and here. And there's a screw with a shoulder on it that goes in this position. So I'll get those plain screws down there first. Now on this camera these screws are a little bit rough. One of them, the one that's hard to get to down in this area, that had been damaged. Now how it came to be damaged, I don't know. I suspect that someone had been trying to get it into position, was having trouble, and their screwdriver just didn't fit well. If I can get that screw started. Drop the screw through that bracket. Fortunately it's a bit dark here today, so I can't really see what I'm doing very well. That screw is started. Just get that running a bit better. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so the other plain screw goes in at this end. Doing up none of these screws tight, they're just very loose at the moment. So that's our 2 plain screws in here and here. And the spring and the shoulder screw go here. Now, The spring, as previously mentioned, is a funny shape. It's meant to be a funny shape. Don't try and improve it. Spring goes on there. The spiky end sticks upwards. And then the shoulder screw goes through that spring, through the bracket, into the top cover. I'm just checking everything is seated. It all looks good. I'm going to tighten the 3 screws. Then after this little operation, I think I'll stop for the day, because it's only early afternoon here, but it's the depths of winter and it's a particularly black day out here today. Okay, so that's in place. We still see what's happening, we can after a fashion. Okay, so taking the end of this spring, if I depress this lever, I can lift the end of the spring round and get it behind there. Need to hook that into place. That's it. So now this lever is sprung loaded with the tail of that spring. And that's looking quite good. And I'm going to stop right there because I'm going to need spotlights to see anything more on this.